In October 1995, school nurse Inez Halpern vanished from Ridgewood Middle School during a routine shift, leaving behind her car, her purse, and a locked nurse's office. Officially, it was ruled a breakdown, a woman unraveling under pressure. But 22 years later, her name appears, signed in ink, on a teenage patient's hospital form. What follows is not just the reopening of a cold case, but the unraveling of a medical conspiracy, a buried trial program, and the return of a woman who was never supposed to survive long enough to be found. Fall 2017, Caledonia County Memorial Hospital, Pennsylvania. It was just past 7:00 a.m. when Lena Whitmore, newly appointed Records Integration Manager at Caledonia County Memorial, poured her second coffee from the break room Keurig. The hospital had recently undergone a long overdue shift from paper to digital records, and Lena had been brought in to supervise the backlogged data entry, a job equal parts scanning, quality control, and babysitting underpaid interns. She returned to her office, a windowless former supply closet, and resumed reviewing the stack of intake forms from the past 2 weeks, verifying each scan against the physical copy before sending it off to the archive drive. Boring, mechanical, until one name caught her eye. Referring, nurse. I. Halpern. She paused, frowning. I. Halpern. That name tugged at something. Familiar, but not recent. Lena pulled up the scanned PDF of the form. It belonged to a walk-in patient, a teenage girl seen for seizure-like symptoms during a weekend clinic shift. The note field read, referred by on-site temp nurse. I. Halpern. The form had been filled out last Sunday, only 5 days ago. Lena stared at it. There was no badge ID number, no agency listed. That alone was odd. Temp staff were logged by their agency and assigned IDs for the weekend shifts, but this nurse had simply written her name. Lena clicked her mouse and brought up the hospital's staffing logs. She searched the temp agency rosters for the clinic shift that Sunday. No match. No I. Halpern on the schedule. No Halpern at all. Something about the name gnawed at her. Lena opened a new tab and typed, Inez Halpern, missing nurse, Pennsylvania, 1990s. Within seconds, it hit. Inez Halpern, 34. Vanished August 1995. No leads, no confirmed sightings. Lena sat back in her chair, blood cooling. She reopened the intake form and zoomed in on the signature line. I. Halpern. Written in cursive, slightly slanted, neat, old-fashioned. There was a distinct loop in the capital H and a backwards-leaning lower loop in the R. It didn't feel like a scribble. It felt like muscle memory. Her phone buzzed. It was Kira, one of the overnight interns. Hey, I just finished scanning the allergy consent batch. Want me to upload or wait for QA? Lena barely heard her. Hold off. Hey, Kira, weird question. You remember the nurse working walk-ins last Sunday? Sort of. Just barely saw her. Older woman. Wore a name badge that said Isabel or Irene, something like that. Kept to herself. Didn't use the break room. Why? Nothing. Just checking something. Lena ended the call and stared at the screen for another moment. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She picked up the phone and dialed Detective Claire Rios, Caledonia PD, Cold Case Division. Claire Rios had been having lunch at her desk, half of a tuna melt and the other half of a stale Diet Coke, when the call came in. She answered on the second ring. Rios? Detective, this is Lena Whitmore with Memorial Hospital. I think you might want to come down here. Something came across my desk. Claire's tone shifted immediately. Go on. Do you remember the Inez Halpern case? Disappeared in 1995, school nurse at Ridgewood High? Claire blinked. Yeah, I was a student there, 6th grade. That case is still technically open, but it's ice cold. Well, I just found a clinic form signed 5 days ago, referred by a nurse named I. Halpern. A pause. Did you just say 5 days ago? By 2 p.m., Claire was walking into Lena's cramped office. The walls were stacked with banker's boxes and dusty file scanners. Lena handed her a printout of the form. Claire took it and sat. She studied the name, the signature. Her pulse picked up. Jesus, she muttered. I thought it might be forged, Lena said. But look, this slanted L, the curve on the H, I compared it to her school nurse forms from '94. It's identical. You have those on hand? Claire asked. No, but the Ridgewood School District digitized everything in 2010. Public archive. Claire nodded. I'll get a forensic doc analyst to confirm. She held up the form. Where'd this come from? Lena pointed at the patient info. Walk-in clinic. Seen Sunday morning. The patient was admitted for seizure symptoms. She's 19. Lives with her mother in Fernville. Where is this nurse now? No idea. She wasn't on the official shift log. I asked the admin on duty. She said they just assumed the agency sent her. No one questioned it. Claire frowned. That's sloppy. Lena shrugged. Weekend coverage, low pay, high turnover. Nobody triple checks IDs for temp nurses. Claire exhaled slowly. It had been 22 years since Inez Halpern's car was found abandoned at the mall parking lot, keys in the ignition. The investigation back then was sluggish, unfocused. It didn't help that her husband, a well-known physician, had painted her as unstable. Depressed, fragile, possible suicide, he'd said. No body, no clear crime scene, no leads. And now, this? I need a copy of the original form, Claire said, and anything else she might have signed. That's all we have, Lena said. She didn't log any notes, just this referral line. What about cameras? Lena shook her head. Old hallway cams only store for 3 days. They get overwritten. We missed the window. Claire stood. All right. Thanks, Lena. You did the right thing. As she left the hospital, Claire slipped the form into a protective folder. For the first time in years, the Inez Halpern case had a pulse, and this time, Claire Rios was the one listening. October 2017, Caledonia County, Pennsylvania. Detective Claire Rios didn't sleep well that night. She rarely did since moving back to Caledonia. There was something about being surrounded by childhood memories. The cracked sidewalk in front of her old middle school, the grocery store with the same flickering O in Food Mart, the echo of her father's boots in the hallway before he left for his last shift. And now, the return, maybe, of a woman she hadn't seen since she was 12. Inez Halpern, the school nurse everyone trusted, the one who gave out saltine crackers and flat ginger ale for nervous stomachs. The one who saw Claire through 2 panic attacks during her first year in middle school. You're not broken, she'd said gently, brushing a damp strand of hair off Claire's forehead. You're just a kid figuring out how much of the world is too loud. Now, 22 years later, Claire stood outside Ridgewood Middle School, formerly Ridgewood High, waiting for the custodian to unlock the old nurse's office. Inside, the room had changed. Gone were the twin metal cots and wooden cabinets. The walls were now painted a cheerful blue, adorned with cartoon bacteria and smiley germs. A younger school nurse worked here now, friendly but distracted, offering only vague answers to Claire's polite questions. Claire wasn't here for answers, though. She was here for context. She stood in the exact spot where she remembered sitting, knees trembling, hands sweating, while Nurse Halpern gently took her pulse. She tried to picture what Inez would have looked like now. In her 50s? Gray at the temples? The idea of her working under an alias, quietly signing her name on a patient file after 2 decades. It didn't make sense. Unless it wasn't an alias, unless it was a message. Back at the precinct, Claire pulled the original missing persons file from archives. She had read it before, once as a rookie cop, then again when she transferred into cold cases. But now, with the new document from Memorial Hospital, she read it differently, actively, not just as record-keeping. Timeline, 1995. August 15th, Inez Halpern leaves Ridgewood High early, citing a migraine. August 16th, her husband reports her missing. August 18th, her car is found abandoned in the parking lot of Twin Pines Mall 30 miles away. Purse on the passenger seat, keys in the ignition, no signs of struggle. August 23rd, initial interviews begin, no leads. September, case begins to go cold. Claire opened the interview transcripts from 95. Most of them were brief. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. But a few statements stood out now. Transcript, August 18th, 1995. Subject, Dr. Alan Reeves, husband. Detective, Sergeant Milo Dandridge. We had our issues, like any couple. She was difficult to live with sometimes. Anxious. I think the schoolwork was draining her. She didn't handle pressure well. I tried to support her. Claire underlined the phrase. She didn't handle pressure well. It was a classic tactic, preemptively framing the victim as unstable. She left me a note once, a year before she vanished, talking about leaving, about reinventing herself somewhere else. Said she was tired of being invisible. There was no note in the file, no physical copy, just his claim. Claire made a note to re-interview Alan Reeves. Next, she reviewed the school's staff interviews. One from a janitor caught her attention. Transcript, August 21st, 1995. Subject, Gordon Tellis, custodian. I remember cleaning out her locker a week after she was gone. Principal told me to clear it for the new nurse. That seemed fast to me. Usually they wait longer in these cases. Was anything still inside? A few papers, snacks, some notes, a book. I put it all in a cardboard box. Don't know where it went after that. Claire closed the folder. A migraine, a missing nurse, a husband who had her declared legally dead just 5 years later. And now, her name surfaces again in a medical clinic, as if it had never been erased. If it was really her, the question wasn't just where she'd been, it was, why now? She called up the original detective on the case, retired Sergeant Milo Dandridge. He still lived nearby, running a bait shop outside of town. "Dandridge here," came the gruff voice on the line. "This is Detective Claire Rios, cold case. You worked the Inez Halpern disappearance back in 95. He was quiet for a beat. "I did. She turn up?" "Not exactly, but her name just showed up on a patient form." "Jesus." A pause. "She was a good woman. Smart. Not someone who just runs off." "You didn't think she ran?" Claire asked. "She left everything. Her ID, car, money, keys. That didn't feel like someone leaving. That felt like someone being removed." Claire leaned forward in her chair. "Why didn't the case go anywhere?" Dandridge gave a low sigh. "Her husband lawyered up fast. Had connections. We didn't have DNA tech like we do now. Cameras were grainy, no solid witnesses, and everyone believed his version, that she was depressed. There was no body, so no real traction." "You believed something else?" "I believed she found something she wasn't supposed to." Claire felt that click in her gut, the same click she'd felt years ago, walking the perimeter of a cold case crime scene and noticing a missing window screen no one else had logged. "What do you mean?" "She worked those school vaccine clinics. She started asking questions about shipment records, told one of the teachers she thought something was off. And then poof, migraine gone, never seen again." Claire ended the call and turned to her laptop. She typed in a new name. Reeves Medical Group. History. the company her husband had joined, a research startup in the late 80s focused on developing pediatric immunotherapies. In 1995, they had been supplying bulk vaccines to regional school districts across Pennsylvania. Claire's stomach turned as she scrolled. 1996. Lawsuit filed, settled out of court, for improper data logging of side effects, no admissions of wrongdoing. And in 2003, merged with Biotech Inc., a pharma giant. Alan Reeves now served on the board. Claire clicked print on the vaccine shipping records. The printer sputtered to life behind her. If this was about medical fraud or corporate malfeasance, then maybe Inez Halpern hadn't vanished into thin air. Maybe she'd been erased. October 2017. Ridgewood Middle School, Caledonia County. Detective Claire Rios stepped into the back wing of Ridgewood Middle School just after the final bell rang. The halls, briefly flooded with chatter and backpacked kids, had already gone quiet again. It was strange how time seemed to collapse here. She hadn't walked these floors since the late 90s, but the scent of floor polish and old paper brought everything back instantly. She signed in with the front office and was met by Principal Shane Kruger, a stiff, overly cautious man in his early 60s with a tight smile and a habit of tapping his wedding ring against his clipboard when nervous. "I remember you," he said, peering over his glasses. "You were in my civics class." Claire nodded politely. "That's right. I was very sorry to hear about your father." He cleared his throat and turned toward the hallway. "The janitor's meeting us by the old locker corridor. You said this is about Nurse Halpern?" Claire followed. "We reopened her file. Her name recently turned up on a medical document. We're just checking some loose ends." Kruger walked stiffly, like someone trying to remember how not to look guilty. "The new nurse's office is completely updated," he said. "But I assume you're interested in the storage areas?" "Yes, specifically the old locker hallway and any closets or maintenance rooms that were tied to staff." They descended a short staircase into the lower wing, the original high school's east corridor, long since closed off to students. The lockers here hadn't been used in years. Most were rusted shut or dented. Overhead lights buzzed with a faint flicker. It was the kind of hallway that still felt haunted, even without the ghost stories. Waiting near the end of the corridor was David Tolan, the longtime janitor, a soft-spoken man in his 70s with a baseball cap pulled low over white hair. "Detective Rios," he greeted. "Still got the same eyes. You look like your dad." Claire shook his hand. "Thanks for meeting me." Kruger stayed behind, pretending to examine peeling paint on a locker while clearly listening. David led her to an old custodial closet. "This used to be where Nurse Halpern kept her overflow supplies. After she disappeared, we converted it for maintenance stuff, but..." He fumbled for a key and unlocked the metal door. "We didn't clear everything out." The door creaked open. Inside was a 6x6 storage space. Metal shelving lined the walls. The air smelled like damp cardboard and old plastic. In the far corner, half hidden behind a busted mop bucket, sat a dust-covered file box labeled in marker, "Nurse, 9395, private." Claire's breath caught. "May I?" she asked. Tolan nodded. "It's yours. Been sitting back there since 96. We always meant to toss it. But I never had the heart." Claire pulled on latex gloves and carefully lifted the box onto a nearby janitor cart. She opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of manila folders, neatly labeled by student name. Handwritten notes, consent forms, vaccination logs, and something else. A spiral-bound notepad, pages yellowing but intact. She flipped through the notebook. It was written in tidy cursive, the same style as the clinic form from 5 days ago. At the top of the first page, "Starting this log privately, something isn't adding up with the shipment lot numbers." Claire read on. "Flu clinic, March 1995. Lot Hammer BQ-174 marked as administered to 41 students. My records only show 37. Admin says it's clerical, but I've counted 3 such inconsistencies in the past 6 months. Need to check with County Health. April 3rd. Called County Office. Their lot records don't match our delivery logs. Our forms show vaccine batch marked from Reeves Labs, Division 3. County says that doesn't exist. April 19th. Confided in Becca, science teacher. Told me to document everything but keep quiet until I know more. She said her cousin works at a lab in Philly. Could run labels if I send a sample. Claire looked up. Becca, who's that? David answered. That'd be Rebecca Lurie, biology teacher, retired about 8 years ago. Claire nodded and kept reading. July 2nd. Saw Alan going through my file cabinet in the den. He said he was looking for insurance paperwork. I don't believe him. Locked it after that. July 9th. One of the janitors, not David, was watching me. His badge said Lanny. I've never seen him before. Asked me if I worked here full time. Gave me a bad feeling. Claire froze. Lanny. She flipped back to the notebook's earlier pages. On a torn-out slip taped to the inside cover was a name. J. Lanny. Check if he's licensed? Back at the precinct that evening, Claire ran the name through the county employment database. Nothing under Lanny. Then she tried the state licensing board. Joseph Lanny, flagged for impersonating medical personnel in 1994, arrested, served 18 months. Claire's hands moved fast now. She dug into archived HR files for Ridgewood. Most weren't digitized, but the Board of Education had scanned them after a budget audit in 2008. She found it. Janitorial temp hire, spring 95. Joseph Lanning. She cross-referenced with arrest records. Lanning equals Lanny. Same DOB, same face, falsified paperwork. So he had been working at the school the same semester Inez began her private log, and just months before she disappeared. Claire leaned back in her chair, heart thudding. Inez had been trying to expose something, and someone had made sure she didn't. October 2017. Halpern Residence, Oak Ridge Subdivision, Caledonia County. The sun was just beginning to drop behind the rooftops of Oak Ridge when Detective Claire Rios parked across the street from the old Halpern house. The neighborhood hadn't changed much since the 90s. Same rusted mailboxes, same leaning basketball hoop 3 doors down. Same distant bark of the Doberman that everyone thought was too old to still be alive. Claire knew this street. Her best friend had lived 2 blocks over. She remembered biking past this exact house, never realizing the woman who vanished would become the mystery that defined her adult life. She double-checked the address, 1178 Maple Row. Claire rang the doorbell and stepped back. The woman who answered looked to be in her late 30s, blonde ponytail, workout leggings, and a toddler on her hip. She had the wary friendliness of someone who didn't like strangers, but still offered them lemonade. Hi, Claire said, showing her badge. Detective Rios, Caledonia PD. Are you Mrs. Garrison? The woman blinked, tightening her hold on the child. Yes? I'm following up on a cold case. You purchased this house in 2012, correct? We did. What's this about? Do you know the name Inez Halpern? The woman thought for a second, then slowly nodded. Yeah, I think she used to live here. Something happened, right? She disappeared? She was reported missing in 1995. We're revisiting the case. May I ask, have you ever found anything unusual here? In the walls, attic, yard, crawl space, anything you didn't expect? Mrs. Garrison hesitated, then opened the door wider. You better come in. The inside of the house had been fully remodeled. Gray laminate floors, modern fixtures, open floor plan. There was no sign of the 1990s suburban interior that once stood here, but the bones remained the same. My husband and I did most of the work ourselves, she explained, leading Claire toward the back of the house. About 2 years ago, we were fixing up the den, which I think used to be a home office. While we were working under the floorboards, she paused and gestured toward the far corner. We found something. Claire followed her gaze. The corner of the room held a tall bookshelf and a child's easel. What exactly did you find? A small metal lockbox, like one of those old portable safes. She crouched and pulled aside a floorboard panel, revealing a shallow gap in the subfloor. It was tucked in right there. The floor had clearly been modified to hide it. Do you still have it? She shook her head. It was rusted shut. We tried to pry it open, but ended up cracking it in half. There was a baggie inside with old keys and a few papers. They were mostly ruined by moisture. We tossed everything out. Claire's chest tightened. You didn't call anyone? Mrs. Garrison shrugged, a little defensive now. We didn't know it had anything to do with anything. Just figured it was junk from the previous owners. Nothing that looked valuable. Do you remember any writing? There was a note, I think. Water damaged. Barely legible. Something about a list. I remember seeing a date, 1995, and the name Rebecca, I think. Claire's ears perked up. Rebecca Lurie, the science teacher mentioned in Inez's notebook. Did the keys have any markings? One had a blue tag with a number on it, maybe a post office box. But again, it was all corroded. Claire stood slowly. The box might have held a duplicate of the notebook, or personal records, maybe even something Inez was trying to protect, a fallback plan if things went wrong. Do you remember which trash service picked up your disposal? Mrs. Garrison's eyes widened. That was 2 years ago. Sometimes waste transfer logs are archived. It's a long shot, but I have to try. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know it could have mattered. Claire gave a thin smile. You weren't supposed to. Thank you for telling me. Back in her car, Claire jotted down a quick summary in her case notebook. House once had a concealed floor cavity in the den. Lockbox found by new owners, likely planted by Inez. Discarded in household trash 2015. Potential lead, P.O. Box key, plus reference to Rebecca. She pulled up the county's sanitation department site and sent a formal inquiry for Oak Ridge trash collection data. June to August 2015. It would take days, if not weeks, to comb through, and even then, there were no guarantees. She called in to dispatch and requested a trace on postal keys with blue tags from the mid-90s. Low odds, but worth a look. Then she opened her notes again. Rebecca. She hadn't tracked her down yet. The retired science teacher Inez had trusted. That evening, Claire sat on her couch with her laptop and searched for Rebecca Lurie, Ridgewood School District, retired. She got a hit on a Facebook profile with a bio that read, Retired science nerd, reader, baker, proud aunt. The last public post was from early that year, tagging someone at an assisted living center outside of Harrisburg. Claire called the facility. The front desk transferred her to the resident wing. A nurse answered. Yes, Ms. Lurie still lives here, but she's under memory care. Do you have a family relationship? I'm a detective, Claire said carefully. I'd like to ask her a few questions about an old friend. The next morning, Claire drove the 2 hours to Harrisburg and sat across from Rebecca Lurie, now 77, in a brightly lit common room filled with puzzles and muzak. Rebecca's eyes were foggy, but there was a sharpness under the surface. Inez Halpern, Claire said gently. Do you remember her? Rebecca's eyes lifted just slightly. She was my friend, she said softly. Kind, nervous sometimes, smart. Do you remember what happened to her? Rebecca stared off toward the window. She got scared, she murmured. Something about the shots. I told her to keep records. I said, don't make noise until you have something real. She said she had names, Claire leaned forward. Names of who? But Rebecca had already drifted. Her attention turned to a bird feeder outside. Blue Jay, she said with a smile. Claire sat back. The pieces were still scattered, but a pattern was forming. Inez had been keeping records. She had discovered something. Maybe names, maybe numbers. And someone made sure that information disappeared. But not entirely, because she had kept one piece of her name alive. Claire opened her phone and looked at the scanned clinic form from 5 days ago. I. Halpern. Written in ink, not hidden, not disguised, not a mistake. A signal. October 2017, Fernville, Pennsylvania. The patient file that had triggered everything was thin. 1 page, 5 days old, from Caledonia Memorial's weekend clinic. Name, Marina Valdez. Age, 19. Complaint, seizure-like episode, first occurrence. Outcome, stabilized, discharged after observation. Recommended follow-up with neurologist. And there it was again, at the bottom, referred by I. Halpern. Detective Claire Rios sat in the hospital's records office, reviewing Marina's intake chart. Most weekend visits like this were forgettable, but something had made Inez, if it was her, choose this chart, sign her name, leave a fingerprint in ink decades after vanishing. Was it a mistake? No. Claire was more certain with every passing hour it was intentional. A breadcrumb. And Claire intended to follow it. She drove 15 miles west to Fernville, a modest working-class town with cracked sidewalks and half-mowed yards. The Valdez home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, quiet and peeling, with a rusted trampoline in the back and wind chimes clinking softly from the porch awning. Claire knocked. The door opened cautiously. "Mrs. Valdez?" Claire asked. The woman standing behind the screen door looked mid-40s, wary but not unfriendly. Her eyes scanned Claire's badge before nodding. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm following up on your daughter's clinic visit from last weekend. I'm not from the hospital. I'm a detective with Caledonia PD. It's about the nurse who saw her." Mrs. Valdez's face changed. Not with confusion, but with something closer to recognition. "The older one?" she said. Claire tilted her head. "You remember her?" "Yes," Mrs. Valdez said slowly. "That's the thing. She seemed out of place, like she didn't work there. Wore the uniform, had a badge, but no one spoke to her." "Do you remember her name?" "She didn't give it, but I remember her face." Claire showed her a scanned yearbook photo from 1994. Inez Halpern, in her late 30s, shoulder-length hair, gentle eyes. Mrs. Valdez didn't blink. "That's her." Claire's pulse skipped. "She was older now," the woman continued. "More lined, different hair, but that's the same woman. She asked questions the others didn't." "What kind of questions?" "About Marina's childhood. If she'd been vaccinated in school. If she'd ever reacted to shots. Even asked if Marina had migraines as a child." "Did she?" "No. But my niece did. My sister's daughter. Died at 14. Seizures. Never diagnosed." Claire leaned in. "Was she also a Ridgewood student?" Mrs. Valdez froze. "Yes." "What year?" 95. Claire's heart started to race. "Name?" "Leah Hernandez." Later that afternoon, Claire accessed Ridgewood's archived health records, cross-checking Leah Hernandez with the vaccination rosters Inez had kept in her box. There it was. Leah Hernandez, April 3rd, 1995. Lot, numbered BQ-174. Administered by I. Halpern. The same lot number Inez had flagged in her private notes. Claire closed her eyes. That lot had shown up 4 times across different clinics. 4 different adverse reactions, all swept under the rug. And now, Marina Valdez, the niece of one of the original affected students, had a seizure at age 19. The same presentation, 2 decades later. There was no way this was coincidence. Back at the precinct, Claire requested a consultation with Dr. Sharon Eliade, a neuroimmunologist who had worked previously with the CDC on vaccine-related case audits. She forwarded the patient chart, Leah's archived file, and Inez's private notes. They met via secure video call. "I'm not seeing a causal link here, Detective," Dr. Eliade said carefully. "But I do see something curious. The patients all show neurological responses potentially connected to an autoimmune trigger." Meaning? Meaning, if there were contaminants or poorly preserved samples in that lot, it's possible there was a systemic problem. One that would have been easy to miss in 1995 before modern tracking protocols. And could it pass down? Genetically? Dr. Eliade hesitated. Some autoimmune vulnerabilities are hereditary. The specific presentation, early migraines, progressive seizure patterns, is rare but not impossible. Claire nodded. So it's plausible that the niece is having symptoms connected to what her aunt suffered after that shot? Plausible, yes. Provable? No. Not after this long. Unless you had the original vaccine batch, unopened, with lab verification. We don't, Claire said. It's gone. The company dissolved years ago. Dr. Eliade paused. Then your best hope is the nurse. Claire looked up. If she's still alive, the doctor continued, and she has records. She may be the only person who can connect the dots. Claire ended the call and stared out the window. The pieces were forming a shape she didn't like. Back in 1995, Inez Halpern had found a pattern. Unexplained reactions to a specific vaccine lot. She'd gone to the district, maybe even to the county. Someone, her husband, the school board, someone inside Reeves' medical group, had shut it down. And now, 22 years later, someone who may be Inez had resurfaced. Briefly. Just long enough to point toward the very thing she'd tried to reveal. The seizure wasn't just a coincidence. It was a flare. That evening, Claire met with a forensic handwriting analyst. She handed over Inez's original school logs, the signature from the recent intake form, and the private notebook from the storage closet. The results came back in 48 hours. There's a 96% match confidence on stroke pattern, slant, and pressure consistency, the analyst said. These were written by the same hand, same person, just older. So it was real. Inez Halpern had returned, not as a ghost, not as a hallucination, but as someone moving in shadows, trying to finish what she started. October 2017, Caledonia County PD HQ, Harrisburg State Records Office. Detective Claire Rios wasn't easily rattled, but the name Joseph Lanny, or Joseph Lanning, depending on which records you trusted, had been gnawing at her since she found it taped inside Inez's private notebook. He had drifted into Ridgewood High's employment records under a falsified name, a temporary janitor with no documented background check, working directly in the nurses' wing. Disappeared 3 months before Inez did. Back then, no one thought to tie the two together. Claire did now. The personnel file she'd pulled from the Ridgewood District Archive was slim. Just 1 page. Joseph Lanning, hired March 1995. Released June 1995. Reference: employment terminated. Budget restructure. Badge: 4388. In L. Supervisor: G. Tellis. Claire made 2 calls that morning. First to the Pennsylvania Department of Education to confirm the badge number. It was fake, issued in an invalid format. Next, She called the state records office in Harrisburg and requested sealed employment applications from 1995 for a man named Joseph Lanning. As a law enforcement official with an open investigation, she was granted temporary access, conditional, tightly regulated. She made the drive the next morning. The Harrisburg records office was quiet. Beige walls, humming fluorescents, a thin smell of paper and Windex. The clerk handed her a thin brown envelope labeled Lanny Joseph, 1994 to 1996. Inside were 3 forms. 1. Employment application, Ridgewood School District 2. Arrest record, June 1994, Philadelphia County. 3. Parole officer transfer request, 1995. Claire read slowly. The arrest record described a man caught impersonating a phlebotomist in a Philadelphia clinic. Lanny had falsified credentials and drawn blood from at least 4 patients before being caught. When asked why he'd done it, his answer was chilling. Just wanted to see how far I could go. Sentenced to 18 months. Served 9. Released January 1995. By March, he was working in Ridgewood High under a fake ID. Claire studied the Ridgewood application again. It included an emergency contact field. Someone named William C. Lanny, older brother. Harrisburg address. She ran the name. Nothing in Caledonia County. But in Luzerne County, just over 60 miles away, she got a match. William Lanny, deceased 2008. But the property had a current resident, per county tax records. J. Lanny. The man was still alive, and still nearby. Claire didn't go alone. She brought Detective Ruiz, a junior partner from cold cases, and contacted Luzerne County PD for backup. She wasn't about to confront a potential offender from a 22-year-old disappearance alone. They arrived at the rural property, a sagging 2-story farmhouse surrounded by scrub pine and old tires. A single mailbox out front, rusted and dented. Claire knocked. No answer. Knocked again. This time a voice from inside. Hoarse. Male. "Who is it?" "Detective Claire Rios, Caledonia PD. We'd like to speak with Mr. Joseph Lanny." A long silence. Then the door creaked open. The man who emerged looked 60 at most. Wiry. Gray at the temples. Yellowed eyes. He blinked hard at the sunlight, one hand gripping the doorframe. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice like torn cardboard. "We're re-examining a case from 1995, Claire said calmly. "You worked as a janitor at Ridgewood High that year. We'd like to ask about your employment." He scratched the side of his nose. "That was a long time ago." "Yes, so I imagine you won't mind helping us clear up a few details." He didn't answer, just opened the door wider. Inside, the house smelled like sour coffee and mildew. Stacks of old newspapers lined the hallway. A single chair faced a muted television playing static. Claire sat across from him at the dining table, Ruiz to her left, body language firm but non-threatening. "You used the name Lanning at Ridgewood," Claire said. "That was fake. Why?" He shrugged. "Had a record. No one hires you with a record. I wanted a job. Easy place to blend in." "You were arrested in 1994 for impersonating medical personnel. Already did time for that." Claire nodded slowly. "Do you remember a school nurse named Inez Halpern?" His eyes flicked. That was the first reaction, barely perceptible, but real. "No," he said, too quickly. "She disappeared that August, last seen in the nurse's office." He said nothing. Claire leaned in. "We found her private notes. She had your name written down, said you were asking strange questions, that you made her uncomfortable." His lips twitched. "She was paranoid." "Was she?" "She thought everyone was out to get her, even her husband." Claire took a risk. "Did he pay you?" A pause, slight, measured. "No," he said again. "What did you do at that school, Mr. Lanny?" "I mopped floors, took out trash." "Why were you in the nurse's office?" "No reason." "You had no business near medical records." "I didn't touch anything." Claire studied his face. He was lying, but she wasn't going to press. Not yet. She stood. "You're not under arrest, but we're reopening this case officially, which means if you remember anything, and I mean anything, I expect a call." She slid her card across the table. Lanny didn't touch it. "Have a good night," Claire said. Outside, Ruiz spoke quietly. "He knows more." Claire nodded. "He's lying, but he's scared. That means we're close." Back at her desk, Claire opened Inez's notebook again and stared at the page with Lanny's name. Then she flipped 2 pages forward and found something she hadn't noticed before. A hastily written line, barely legible in pencil. "He told me the samples weren't destroyed, just moved." Claire stared at it. Samples. Not records. Not forms. Biological samples. And if they weren't destroyed, where the hell were they now? October 2017, Caledonia Memorial Hospital, Fernville, Pennsylvania. The phrase haunted her all night. The samples weren't destroyed, just moved. It rewrote everything. Claire had assumed the cover-up in 1995 had been about silence, intimidation, falsified logs, buried paper trails. But this line in Inez's notebook pointed to something else. The evidence hadn't been erased. It had been hidden, and that meant there was still a chance, a sliver. Claire began digging. She started with Caledonia Memorial's pathology lab, a conversation with the hospital's archivist, a fast-talking woman named Rena who had worked in records since the late 80s. "We only started digitizing test samples in 2007, Rena explained, paging through a grimy paper binder. "But before that, everything was labeled and boxed, stored down in sub-level storage." "You still have samples from the 90s? Claire asked. "Depends what you're looking for. Tissues and biopsies were kept longer. Fluids, if they were flagged, maybe. But blood draws for standard clinic visits?" Rena shrugged. "Usually discarded after a year or two, unless someone specifically logged a retention request." Claire leaned forward. "And who could make that request? Physicians, lab techs, or nursing supervisors?" Claire pulled out the scan of Marina Valdez's chart, the one where the name I. Halpern had appeared 5 days ago. "Did this intake visit involve blood work?" Rena examined it. "Looks like just a basic draw. CBC, liver panel, thyroid, all standard." "Was a sample retained?" Rena frowned and walked over to her desktop. A few keystrokes later, she blinked. "Huh. What?" "There's a retention tag." Claire sat up straighter. "It says, hold, red cap, 30 days minimum, signed by Halpern I, with an internal ID number." "Can you trace that number?" Rena raised an eyebrow. "Already doing it?" 3 minutes later, she looked stunned. "This ID was reactivated one time only, last Sunday. Someone used it to order the sample retention. But there's no associated user account. It was archived in 1995. Claire's stomach dropped. Inez had used her old hospital credentials, or a clone of them, to flag a sample, not just sign a chart, flag a sample. "Where is it now?" Claire asked. Rena led her down to the sub-level storage, a basement room cold enough to preserve anything organic. Industrial refrigerators lined the back wall, humming quietly, each one marked by year and sample type. Rena pulled open Fridge Unit C. Inside was a tray of vials, clearly labeled. Claire scanned until she found it. Patient, M. Valdez Draw. Date, Octa 1, 2017. Retention code, R30. AL. Claire took a picture, then carefully had the sample transferred to a forensic courier for DNA and tox panel testing. Back at the precinct, Claire began looking for patterns again. She pulled out the full list of names from Inez's 1995 notebook. Students who'd received vaccines from lot BQ-174. Of the 41 names, 4 had experienced immediate adverse reactions, per Inez's records. 2 were listed as seizure onset under 18. 1, Leah Hernandez, had died. The rest were never followed up. Claire cross-referenced school health logs, public obituaries, and medical board complaints. And then she found something that made her stop breathing. Another student from the list, Melissa Nix, had died in 2013, age 31, cause of death, complications from early onset multiple sclerosis, another autoimmune disease, another neurological pathway. She traced Melissa's childhood address, Caledonia, and her clinic provider back then? Ridgewood School Nurse Station. Claire didn't need a map to see the shape now. The BQ-174 lot had affected multiple children, slowly, in different ways. Some had shown symptoms immediately, others over years. Inez had caught the start of it. But the district, or someone close to it, had decided not to listen, or worse, to intervene. She returned to Fernville the next day and met Marina Valdez in person. They sat across from each other in the Valdez kitchen, mother hovering protectively near the doorway. Marina looked healthier than expected, thin, quiet, with a calm edge that read older than 19. "Do you remember the nurse from the clinic?" Claire asked gently. Marina nodded. "Yeah. She didn't act like the others." "What do you mean?" "She didn't rush. She listened. Most of the others just wrote things down and left. She asked about my history, my mom's history, my aunt." "She mentioned your aunt?" "I think so. She asked if anyone in my family ever had seizures or migraines. I said my mom told me about Leah. She got quiet then." "Did she say anything before she left?" Marina thought. "She looked at me and said, 'You're not broken. You're just loud to the world.'" Marina paused. It sounded like something she'd said before, like she knew me, or someone like me. Claire swallowed hard. That was exactly what Inez had said to her, 20 years ago in the nurse's office, during her first panic attack. Later that evening, the forensics lab called. "We ran the CBC panel on the Valdez sample. Nothing alarming at first glance, but when we cross-referenced the protein markers, we found something weird." Claire tensed. "What?" "There's a spike in autoantibodies targeting the myelin sheath. That's rare. Almost unheard of in someone this age unless there's genetic history or prior immune activation." Claire felt her pulse rise. "Prior activation from what?" "Can't say for sure, but it's similar to profiles we've seen in patients exposed to contaminated biologics. You said this girl had a relative with similar symptoms?" "She did." "Then there's a real chance this isn't spontaneous. Someone needs to be looking at longitudinal patterns." "We are," Claire said. "One more thing. There's an odd trace protein. We couldn't ID it locally. We're sending it to a university lab for comparison." Claire hung up and stared out at the precinct parking lot as rain started to fall. Somewhere, Inez had known this was coming, and somewhere else, someone still didn't want it found. October 2017, Highland District, Northern Caledonia. Dr. Alan Reeves lived in a gated estate 20 minutes north of Caledonia. Brick colonial, triple-gabled, wrapped in a white security fence with camera mounts at every corner. The kind of place that whispers quiet power. Old money, or at least old protection. Claire parked outside the gate and buzzed in. The intercom crackled. A calm, male voice. "Yes?" "Detective Claire Rios, Caledonia PD. I called earlier. Long pause, then a beep. The gate slid open. As she drove up the path, Claire reviewed what she knew. In 1995, Alan Reeves had reported Inez missing. He'd claimed she was depressed, unstable, maybe preparing to run. But he had lawyered up immediately after filing the report. And 5 years later, he'd declared her legally dead. 2 years after that, his company, Reeves Medical Group, quietly merged with Biotech Inc. It was a clean progression. Too clean. Alan Reeves opened the door himself. He was 63 now, but looked 10 years younger. Strong jawline, still fit frame, impeccable blazer. The kind of man who wore control like aftershave. "Detective," he said, extending a hand. "You've stirred up quite the old ghost." Claire didn't take the hand. "Thanks for agreeing to speak." "Of course. I want to help however I can. I loved my wife." He led her into a glass and oak sitting room. Everything smelled like varnish and scented diffusers. They sat. He poured her a water without asking. Claire didn't drink. "I understand Inez's name appeared on a clinic form," he said smoothly. "That must be upsetting for everyone involved." "She signed it," Claire said. "In person, 5 days ago." Reeves blinked. That was the first crack. "That's highly unlikely." She also flagged a blood sample for retention, using an ID that hasn't been active since 1995. He leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. "You think she's alive?" Claire met his eyes. "I think someone's pretending she isn't." He said nothing. "I spoke to your former school district. Your wife had flagged vaccine irregularities before she vanished. Did she ever share those concerns with you?" Alan's mouth twitched. "My wife was unwell near the end. She became paranoid, distrustful, convinced that something terrible was happening in that school. Was something happening? I don't know. But she saw shadows where there were none." Claire nodded. "You're aware her private notes were recovered last week, including logs of specific students who had adverse reactions, including lot numbers, one of which your company supplied?" Another pause, tighter this time. "I had no knowledge of that," he said carefully. "Reeves Medical Group was never involved in direct distribution. We were a biotech R&D firm." "Not according to the 1995 district invoice. Your name is on the procurement contract." Alan's fingers drummed once, then stopped. Claire leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves, did your wife discover something? Something she wasn't supposed to?" His voice dropped half a tone. "She found anomalies. That much is true. I advised her not to jump to conclusions. She didn't listen." "Did you tell anyone what she'd found?" "She made a scene at a board meeting. That was unfortunate." "Did someone ask you to silence her?" Reeves's expression didn't change, but something passed behind his eyes. A flicker. "I don't know what happened to Inez," he said softly. "She left. That's all I know." Claire studied him. "You had her declared dead in 2000. She was gone. You've remarried. She wouldn't have wanted me alone. You inherited full rights to her estate." Alan sat still. Claire reached into her folder and slid a photo across the table. It was a recent still from hospital security, blurry but clear enough. Alan stared at it. His jaw tightened. "That's her," Claire said. "That's Inez. She's alive." He looked away. Not at the floor. Not in guilt. In calculation. After a moment, he stood and walked to the window. "She came to me," he said finally. 3 months ago." Claire's pulse jumped. "She what?" "She showed up here, unannounced. I didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was gray. Her voice was different." "What did she want?" "She said she'd been hiding. that she had proof. She was ready to go public. And I told her it would destroy both of us. Claire stood now, too. You tried to stop her. No, he said. I tried to warn her. She didn't understand how far this goes. Claire narrowed her eyes. How far does it go? He turned, and now his face showed something new. Not guilt, not grief, fear. She took something, he said quietly. Back then, from a freezer, a prototype vial. It wasn't approved for testing. It was supposed to be destroyed. What was in it? A serum. Recombinant vector therapy. Experimental. Not intended for pediatric use. Not intended for anyone. Claire's breath caught. You're telling me the contaminated lot may have included it? Yes. Unintentionally? Alan didn't answer. Claire leaned in. What was it designed to do? He looked her dead in the eye. Enhance neuroplasticity. Accelerate immune adaptation. We wanted to eliminate developmental delays. Instead, we triggered them. And there it was. Finally, the truth. Who else knows? Not many. Most of them are dead, or they know better than to speak. Claire stared at him. She has a sample, he said. Or the sequence, or the logs. I don't know, but she said she was going to give it to someone. Who? She wouldn't tell me. Claire left the Reeves estate with hands shaking. Inez hadn't just uncovered a pattern. She'd stumbled into corporate human experimentation under the guise of school vaccine programs. They had tried to erase her, and now she was back. Not to haunt, but to finish. That night, Claire opened her caseboard. She drew a line from Reeves Medical to Ridgewood, another to Biotech Inc. Then she added a new line, one she hadn't considered before, unknown recipient, because Inez hadn't signed that patient chart by accident. She was leaving clues, and the next one was out there. October 2017, Caledonia County. Harrisburg, unknown, 3 days. That's how long it had been since Claire walked out of Dr. Alan Reeves's home with the truth weighing in her chest like wet cement. A prototype serum, administered without consent, and buried under layers of silence, marriage, and money. Inez hadn't just found a pattern. She had witnessed a crime on a molecular level, one that altered lives, possibly ended them, and definitely changed hers forever. Claire knew now that Inez hadn't run. She'd been forced into hiding. Claire's focus turned to one question. Who was Inez trying to give the data to? It had to be someone outside the system, someone Inez believed could protect and expose the truth without tipping off the same people who had silenced her. Claire went back through the notebook, every name, every note. She ran them against journalists, whistleblower sites, independent labs. Nothing stuck. Until she remembered something Mrs. Valdez had said about the woman at the clinic. She said she used to teach, not just treat, that she missed research. Claire dug back into Inez's resume. Before she'd come to Ridgewood, she'd done a year-long rotation at a teaching hospital in upstate New York, Wexler Health, small, but with a respected neurobiology unit. One of her colleagues there was a man named Dr. Colin Braver, now a senior advisor to an independent medical ethics watchdog called Helion Foundation. Helion had gone public last year for exposing a blood storage abuse scandal in Oregon. Claire's hands started shaking. She called Helion, gave her badge number, asked if they'd had any recent contact with someone identifying as Inez Halpern, or working under a false name but submitting neuroimmunological data flagged with an old lot code, BQ-174. They said no. But then the receptionist paused. Wait, let me check our anonymous tip vault. 2 minutes later, she returned. We had a dead drop logged on Monday. No return address. but it included a vial and a typed letter. No contact info. The data matched several flagged immunotrigger proteins. No source code, but the letter said, "For Colin Braver, this is what I was silenced for." Claire's heart nearly stopped. "Do you still have the envelope it came in?" "We do. Postmarked from Harrisburg." It was Inez. She had finally sent it. Claire got in the car. As she drove toward Harrisburg, rain slicing the windshield, she called in a protection request for Dr. Braver. She didn't know if he was in danger, but someone out there might be watching the drop chain. And Claire wasn't about to lose her one surviving link to Inez. She didn't make it to the city, because halfway down Route 8, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Detective Rios." A voice, older, raspy, shaken. "I left the data with Helion, but they'll never believe it without me." Claire's pulse spiked. "Inez?" A long silence. Then, "I don't have long. There's a place. Ridgewood Greenhouse. Back lot, midnight." The line went dead. Claire pulled over and sat in silence for a moment, listening to her own breath. She's alive, and she's coming out. 11:58 p.m. Ridgewood High Greenhouse backlot. Claire waited alone. She had told no one, not Ruiz, not dispatch, not even her captain. There were things that still needed protecting, and Inez Halpern was at the top of that list. The greenhouse loomed ahead, dark and angular. The school grounds were silent. Just the chirp of a broken floodlight and the hum of wind through the chain link. Then, footsteps. Claire turned. From the shadows emerged a figure, hooded, small-framed. She moved slowly, deliberately, then stopped. Inez. She looked older, streaks of white in her once brown hair, faint scars along her cheek. But her eyes were the same. Claire said nothing. Neither did she. They just looked at each other, two ghosts in a place that had tried to bury them both. "I remember you," Inez finally said. "Panic attack, 7th grade. You couldn't breathe." Claire blinked. "You told me I wasn't broken, just loud to the world." Inez nodded. "You were." Claire stepped forward, slow. "Where have you been?" "Nowhere that mattered. Just away. Waiting for a moment where the truth could surface without getting crushed. You have it now. The data, the evidence. We can protect you." Inez gave a sad smile. "You can't protect what's already been tagged." Claire's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Inez reached into her coat, pulled out a second vial, this one glowing faintly under the greenhouse's distant light. "This was the prototype. I took it before they could destroy it, but I handled it wrong. It got in. Not much, but enough." Claire's voice cracked. "You've been sick?" Inez nodded. "I don't have long. That's why I surfaced. The window was closing." Claire swallowed hard. "Why now? After all these years?" "Because they started testing again. Same serum, new name. And this time, it's not in schools." Claire's mind reeled. "Where?" But before Inez could answer, the sound of a distant click echoed from the shadows. Both women turned. A figure emerged. Male, tall, dressed in black, gun drawn. Claire went for her sidearm, too slow. "Give me the vial," the man said. Inez didn't move. "I said," but Claire had already shifted position. Gun up. "Drop it now." The man turned slightly. Claire fired once. Center mass. He collapsed without a sound. Inez stared, shaking. "You didn't have to. "Yes, I did," Claire said. "You've been running long enough." She walked to the body, reached for the ID, private security, not local, badge clipped with Biotech Inc. markings. The cleanup crew had come early, and they weren't finished. As dawn approached, Claire and Inez sat in the back seat of Claire's car, staring out at the horizon. "I've never had anyone protect me before," Inez said quietly. Claire glanced at her. "You did once. A scared kid in a nurse's office." Inez smiled. "I guess it's your turn now," she said. November 2017, Caledonia County PD, Helion Foundation, national media. The man Claire shot outside the Ridgewood greenhouse was identified 2 days later as Adam Kessler, age 41, employed through a third-party contractor tied to Biotech Inc. No local record, no employment filed under real name, no open warrants. But he had gear, burner phone, encrypted USB, and a tracker tuned to a signal found embedded in the prototype vial. They weren't just looking for Inez. They had been tracking her. Inez Halpern was moved under federal witness protection in less than 24 hours. Quietly, cleanly. No press, no court filings. Not yet. She gave a full deposition under seal, naming every researcher, lab tech, courier, and administrator she remembered, including Alan Reeves. Her health was declining. The damage from her exposure to the prototype serum, slow-acting, persistent, had caught up with her. Tremors, memory gaps, periodic migraines, but her mind was still sharp, and her records were meticulous. Claire sat beside her through most of it, taking notes, watching history unfold. The Helion Foundation released a public statement 2 weeks later. An independent whistleblower has provided documentation suggesting that experimental biologics were circulated in school vaccination programs during the 1990s, without proper FDA clearance or informed consent. These findings raise serious ethical, legal, and public health concerns. The news exploded. National outlets ran the story under code names like the Ridgewood Trial, Project BQ-174, and the Ghost Nurse Files. Biotech denied involvement. Reeves Inc. vanished behind lawyers. But the wave had begun. 3 lawsuits were filed within 5 days. By the end of the month, Congress opened a closed-door review. Claire returned to her precinct just after Thanksgiving. She walked into the cold case room, quiet, forgotten, and opened evidence box number 117B. Inside were the first items ever logged when Inez was reported missing. A photograph, a broken watch, a signed resignation letter Claire now knew had been forged, and a copy of the district's 1995 clinic roster. She added 3 new items. A printout of the security footage from the hospital, a signed lab report from Helion confirming the serum's presence, and Inez's final deposition, handwritten in careful script. Then she closed the box and labeled it again. Halpern, Inez, active, 1995-2017. Status, survivor. 2 months later, in a private memorial, undisclosed location, Inez passed quietly. Her immune system collapsed faster than doctors expected. The exposure, traced to a cracked vial in the spring of 1995, had festered for over 20 years. She died in hospice care, her identity never made public, but her name had become a movement. She was profiled in The Atlantic, Frontline, and a documentary titled The Nurse Who Wouldn't Vanish. Claire spoke in the final 5 minutes. She told me once that I wasn't broken, just loud to the world. That stayed with me. And when she came back after everything, she still wasn't broken. She was louder than ever. Claire Rios, promoted to lead investigator, Cold Case Division, now teaches a seminar at the State Academy. Silent Witnesses, When the Evidence Speaks Without a Body. The Halpern case is her opening module. In the years that followed, Claire received hundreds of emails. former Ridgewood students, parents, nurses from other districts, even quiet whistleblowers still too afraid to go public. Most just said the same thing. I thought I imagined it. Thank you for proving I didn't. They never found out who gave the order to distribute the prototype. They never traced all the vials, but they found Inez, and in doing so, they found the truth. Some stories don't end with a killer. Some end with a survivor and a name that refused to be erased.